and utter rush.
Today's case takes us into the supernatural realm of vampires. In 1991, the tabletop game Vampires: The Masquerade swept the nation. Similar to Dungeons & Dragons, this role-playing game explored mythical worlds by using 10-sided dice that decides the fate of the players. For Rod Farrell, creating a vampire cult of his own would lead him down a dark path of worshiping the occult and ending in a that would be talked about for decades. Roderick Justin Farrell was born on March 28, 1980, in Murray, Kentucky, known as the Buckle of the Bible Belt. His parents, Sandra Gibson and Rick Farrell, were at the young age of 17 when he was born. Still children themselves, Sandra and Rick believed that the right path to take was marriage. So, days after Rod's birth, the couple were married. Unfortunately, the honeymoon phase ended quickly, and 3 weeks after the marriage, they were divorced. After this separation, Rick enlisted in the military, and Sandra moved back home with her parents to raise her son. Rod would not see his father again until 1998. Sadly, the home she was bringing her son into would traumatize him for life. From a young age, Sandra and her sister were hurt by their father. Bringing Rod into the home meant that he would endure the same fate. When Rod was 5, his grandfather set up a fishing trip and took Rod with him, where he allowed his group of friends to do terrible and horrifying things to him. Sandra took Rod over to the home of one of the friends to confront them, but this only traumatized him more. Sandra made money as a lady of the night and an exotic dancer. Eventually, she met a man who would become her next husband, but he did not want Rod in their lives. So she left him with her parents and moved with her new husband to Michigan, leaving Rod in the hands of her extremely religious and harmful parents. Once again, Sandra experienced another marriage that would end as a result of being too young to make long-term decisions. One evening, they fought about Rod, and Sandra returned home to Murray, Kentucky, to be with her son. As a single mother in a small town with no money, one would assume that Sandra would fall into the unsavory situations as so many have before. However, she did not take the path of substance abuse. Instead, she began exploring the world of vampires. She began playing the game Vampires: The Masquerade and introduced Rod to vampire-themed movies, games, and books, including Anne Rice's series of novels called The Vampire Chronicles. She had also taken him to see the movie The Crow, which they both loved. He would copy the makeup and wear a similar shirt as the main character. He enjoyed drawing dark fantasy imagery, including dragons, fairies, and mythological beasts. In September of 1995, when Rod was 15, he met a boy at school named Stephen Murphy. Stephen was odd in the same way that Rod was, and also had an affinity for vampires. He ran his own vampire clan with his brother and friends, and invited Rod to join the family. His vampiric name was Jaden.
We see ourselves as basically a different breed, a different race. It's almost as if we're on a higher form of, evolution, because we get to where most people dream about, the capabilities that we have, and that we're able to accomplish and stuff.
I never really had a father anyway, so, I look to Jaden more as a father figure. I was with Jaden and the Jaden family for a few months. He had indoctrinated me into the vampiric way of life. He had taught me the true ways of it. Separated the myth and legend from reality,
said Rod. In January of 1996, Jaden invited Rod to the cemetery to take part in the ritual that would turn him into a vampire. They went to the Old Salem Cemetery, and he took him to a tree where apparently all the chosen ones were taken to be made by their sires. Jaden pulled out his blade, and Rod sliced himself 3 times on his arm. Jaden then proceeded to drink his and do the same. They sat together in meditation for hours, which apparently resulted in Rod turning into a 500-year-old vampire named Visago. He apparently chose the name because of the demon Visago in occult literature. Visago was a goetic demon from a spellbook called The Lesser Key of Solomon. He was third in command of the spirits of Satan's army of rebel angels and possessed special powers like fortune telling. His bedroom also proved to be of a disturbing boy. He claimed it was an array of the darker side of the occult, including owning the Necromonicon, the Satanic Bible. He had upside-down crosses, shards of glass lying in the corner of his room, and hooks with metal cables similar to Hellraiser. According to a commenter online that plays Vampire the Masquerade, the pile of glass symbolized his vampire clan from the game Malkvanes. In the game, there are outsiders and weirdos who lived mentally ill and broken lives before becoming a vampire. He also enjoyed hanging upside down and drinking his girlfriend's. They often hung out at the Vampire Hotel, which was an abandoned building where they would carry out their rituals. The broken structure, made of concrete, has often been said to have a history of paranormal activity. The group would spend most of their time together talking about their troubles and trying to help each other out. However, Rod always took it a few steps further. While out with friends one night, he took the life of a defenseless kitten in an extremely disturbing way. He claimed he would do anything for a thrill. This caused Jaden to slowly stop hanging out with Rod. The following fall, he convinced his friends to join him at an animal sanctuary where they continued to hurt puppies. Both Rod and Jaden dropped out of high school at the age of 16. Neither had a job lined up or a plan for their future. They spent most of their time conducting live-action role-playing in their vampire clan until Rod began competing for the title as the leader and threatening to take Jaden's life. The feud ended with Jaden and his friend Bones showing up at Rod's house. When Rod came outside, he threatened Jaden, so he thrust him up on the wall and began him. When he finally released Rod, Jaden told him to leave him alone. Rod was a very big part of the illegal substance scene in Murray. After the fight, Rod left the Jaden family and formed a new vampire clan. His first new member was a boy he crossed over into vampirism by the name of Michael Schaefer. Next, he recruited Charity Shea Kessie, Howard Scott Anderson, and Dana Cooper. Dana commented about the first time she met Rod, saying,
1995 was the first time I met Rod Farrell. I had joined Rod's cult. I joined out of curiosity and mostly because I felt isolated a lot, and going into the cult gave me a sense of belonging.
Rod completed the vampire ritual with Dana. They drank each other's and vowed to be committed to the group forever.
We're never psychotic killers. We talked about a bunch of stuff, but it never really came down to it. We always just talked about it like later, like that's next week, that's next Tuesday.
Michael said when asked about the cult's intentions. Howard grew up like the other teens in a poor household. His father was an alcoholic, and Howard would often bring leftovers home from his fast food job just to give his younger brothers something to eat. I guess you could say Rod had this social machismo about him. People would just gravitate towards him. I was just happy to be his right-hand man. Me, Rod, Jaden, Charity, and Dana, we all came from dysfunctional families that were barely making it. In our minds, it was us against the world. Rod had an ex-girlfriend that lived in Eustis, Florida, named Heather Wendoff. They met when Rod's mother moved them to Florida briefly. She was interested in the occult and found Rod's perspective fascinating. Her parents brought her up in an average middle-class American household. Her parents were described as an easygoing couple who really had it together. The couple owned 5 acres of property and were constructing a new home for themselves. The family went camping, to Disney World, and to all other usual family events. Rod and his clan had been dreaming of leaving Murray for months and claimed the police were trying to target them for crimes they did not commit, like what happened at the animal sanctuary. Fortunately for Michael, he never went on the trip because his mother had sent him to a youth rehabilitation program days before. Heather and Rod had been talking over the phone for months when Rod claimed that Heather asked him to come to Florida to slay her parents. However, Rod told his mother that the plan was for him to marry Charity in Daytona, and then the group would move to New Orleans. So one day the 4 teenagers jumped into Howard's red Buick Skylark and left town.
Taking what they call the golden dragonfly acid. I dropped a 10 strip of that. We arrived in Florida, let's say 12 hours later. I called Heather up and I said, look, either you join us or not. And well, that's when the plans for the night had begun.
On November 25th, 1996, the four teens met Heather at a cemetery near her home and conducted the ritual that would turn her into a vampire. That evening, the teens went to Heather's house at 24135 Green Tree Lane. The girls stayed in the car, while Rod and Howard went to circle the windows to figure out where everyone was inside. Heather, Charity, and Dana drove to Heather's boyfriend's house, leaving Rod and Howard at her house. Heather's mother, Naoma Ruth Queen, was in the shower, and her father, Richard Wendorf, was sleeping on the couch.
After circling the whole house, they entered the garage area, which is to the left of the house. He decided to look for a little better weapon, and in doing so, they found a short crowbar. They then entered through the garage into a little washroom and went down past the couch where the father was lying,
said Detective Al Gussler. As they entered the living room, they noticed the TV was turned up loudly, and just before Rod snuck around the back of the couch, the two danced around foolishly from the rush of the crime they were about to commit. Rod then struck Richard across the head with the crowbar. He continued to strike him over and over again, finally inserting it into his heart. In a police interview, Rod said, "As I was heading back to the parents' bedroom looking for the Explorer keys, that's when her mom came out through the kitchen area and she started to lunge at me, spilled her coffee on me, went all over me. Then she clawed my face and grabbed my wrist. That's when I took the straight end of the crowbar and just started bashing the back of her head." Once Heather's parents' lives were taken, they found the Ford Explorer keys, a few other valuables, and stole the vehicle. When they met up with Heather, Charity, and Dana, they recalled that Rod was wearing a green t-shirt covered in with spatter across his face. The teens switched the license plate from their car to the Ford Explorer and drove to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The group of teens was pulled over 5 separate times, but Rod claimed he spoke respectfully with the cops so that they had no inclination that they were the teens sought after for the When Heather's sister Jennifer arrived home, she found the gruesome scene of her mother and father's death. You can hear her say on the 911 call,
"My father just been I don't know where my sister is. She's only 15 years old and she's gone. And the Explorer's gone."
On the evening news, they said,
"It was Heather's older sister, Jenny, who found their parents around 11 o'clock last night when she came home from work. Police believe Heather and 3 of her friends took the couple's truck and tried to cover their tracks."
When recalling the days following the crime, Rod said,
The 3 days we were on the run, it was an utter rush. I loved that, because I knew every cop in the nation was looking for me. I knew that even by one slip, I could lose everything. Everything would go into catastrophe. The only hard part was keeping the other 4 in line.
Heather said,
Felt almost dreamlike when everything was going on. Felt like a nightmare. I couldn't leave. I was so afraid of him. If he could do that to my parents, what could he do to me? I was so scared.
Rod's plan was to meet up with his friend Chicken Man, who was apparently famous for conducting drinking rituals. On the way to Baton Rouge, they saw 2 households that seemed like no one was home. Rod took the crowbar that he used to end Heather's parents' lives and broke in. He stole a crossbow, bullets, liquor, and $20 worth of change in a piggy bank that paid for the gas to get the rest of the way there. Upon arrival, the teens found a bridge and threw away the weapon. They then drove to the Central Plex, where Charity called her grandmother, hoping she would wire them some money. Her family told her to go to the Howard Johnson's hotel, where they would send the money, but Dana had a feeling it was a setup.
Whenever Charity was actually on the payphone talking to her relatives, Rod was with her, so I knew he was monitoring the call. I don't know if he in fact knew if it was a setup or not, but I had a feeling something was going to happen.
When police arrived at the hotel, 2 officers took the teens to a squad car, and the rest of the police surrounded the Ford Explorer. Police claimed Heather was the only one who seemed upset when they were arrested. While the rest of the teens seemed somber, Rod was extremely arrogant. The police proceeded to take them down to the sheriff's department for questioning. Rod and Charity seemed composed in the face of the law as they made their way out of the holding cell. Their crimes would become a national spectacle as the media had taken the story by storm and images of the Gothic cult members spread. News outlets showed videos of Rod sticking his tongue out at onlookers as he was carted into court and hiding behind his long black hair. In 1997, while the teens waited for their trials, Rod's mother was tried for writing explicit letters to a 14-year-old boy. She was 34 at the time. Some reports claim it was actually Jaden Murphy's brother. In one of the letters she wrote, "I longed to be near you, for your embrace. Yes, to become a vampire, a part of the family, immortal and truly yours forever. I only hope that one day you will once again return to Murray. You will then come for me and cross me over, and I will be your bride for eternity, and you my sire." In 1998, Rod Farrell went on trial but pled guilty in the opening minutes to the double slaying of Heather's parents, Naoma and Richard, hoping to avoid the death sentence, and claimed most of his friends were innocent, except for Howard, who was an accessory. He became the youngest person in Florida on death row at the time. His mother moved to Florida to be closer to him and wrote him letters daily. She visited him every Saturday. Howard was given a life sentence after pleading guilty to being a principal to first-degree murder. Charity Kessie was convicted on 2 counts of third-degree murder, robbery with a deadly weapon, and burglary with a weapon or explosives. She was sentenced to 10.5 years in prison. Dana Cooper was convicted of the same charges but was given a 17.5-year prison sentence. Heather was acquitted by 2 grand juries. She claimed she was unaware that Rod had plans to end her parents' lives. However, she became estranged from many family members. Her sister went to live with her aunt and uncle, Billy and Gloria Wendorf. They forbid any contact between the 2 sisters. Heather spent a short amount of time with her grandmother until she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital after her grandmother attempted to shoot her. Upon her release, she moved in with a foster family. In 2006, she told reporters at the Orlando Centennial that she was married and living out of state with her husband. She attended art school and married a local theater and film producer in North Carolina. She claimed she reunited with her family in 2002. When asked by Jaden why he committed the murders, he said,
Every individual has that point in time, at least once in their life, where they can cross this line. Most people are able to turn back. I myself, as many people well know, had basically enthralled myself in the deterioration of myself. I had taken the small amount of decay I did have, and I just built it. I let it grow. I wanted to become fully decayed in mind, soul, body, everything. I wanted to be darkness.
Rod later confessed that Heather never actually asked him to take the life of her parents, but she often dropped hints. He claimed that she told him her father was harming her, which is why he went to save her, but those accounts were never corroborated either. Records also showed that Rod had burned the letter V into both of the deceased, which many people assumed was the marking of his vampire name, Visago. In November 2000, the Florida Supreme Court reduced Rod's sentence to life in prison since they ruled that juveniles should not automatically get life without parole sentences, since scientific research has shown that their brains are still developing during their teenage years. In 2006, Charity was released from prison. 5 years later, in 2011, Dana was also released. In 2018, Howard's sentence was reduced to 40 years in prison. He will be 51 when he is released from prison in 2032. The families of the slain were satisfied with the reduction. Their main concern was Rod, not Howard. In 2019, Rod attempted to receive a reduction of his life sentence, but the circuit judge, G. Richard Signaltree, ruled that he will stay behind bars for the rest of his life. He said, "These 2 victims were peacefully going about their daily lives when the defendant violated the sanctity of their home. Rather than restraining them or tying them up as he had contemplated, he entered their home and beat them to death with a crowbar. After his arrest, he described these events to law enforcement and later to journalists without any remorse and without any indication that he was psychologically impacted." Jennifer begged for the judge to keep Rod in prison, not just because he took the life of her parents, but because of the statement he made to the Baton Rouge Police Department, stating, "Thought about waiting for Heather Wendroff's sister Jennifer, but decided nah, why bother? Let her come home, have a mental breakdown, call the police," which I was correct, she did. During the resentencing case, Rod apologized to the families, holding back tears and saying, "I know nothing I say or do can bring them back. I hope you know how truly sorry I am." He claimed he was hiding behind the sadistic sarcasm during his initial confession to the police, and it took him years to understand how he affected the families and the entire community. Throughout his time in prison, Rod was married, then divorced. During his attempt at reducing his sentence, his fiancée said that she would let him move into her home and she would help him find a job if he ever got out. However, the judge confirmed he will never get that chance. In 2020, Sandra was living in Bellevue, Florida, running a jewelry business. She moved in with her 90-year-old mother to take care of her. Sandra's father had dementia and was confined to a lockdown memory unit in Sarasota. The lives of everyone involved were forever changed on that fateful day. Before Rod's sentence was reduced, he made this comment about his death.
Going to the electric chair is, as morbid as it may sound, it's been a fantasy of mine. I used to think about that a long time ago when I was 9 years old. Oh, I used to dream about my own death, so it was just intriguing. It was almost like I was romantic with the subject of death. I don't care how I die as long as I do so. I have nothing left on earth.
What an end to the story about the morbid vampire cult that took over the news in the 90s. What do you guys think about this story? Does Howard deserve to be released? What about the other girls? Let us know in the comments. As always, don't forget to click that notification bell, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.